Joaquín Guzmán López Jr., alias El Güero, youngest son of the infamous El Chapo. Not much is known about Joaquin as far as anecdotes like the one we spoke of on his brother, Ovidio, about being pulled out of the private school. If we found little information on Ovidio, we found even less for Joaquin. Being on the internet as long as I have been on this subject, I've heard many people's opinions on him, and a whole lot of people saying he was the soft one, he's the one that wasn't built for the business, he's the one that should have never been in the game, he's the one that didn't want to be in the game. But another thing I've learned about the internet is that people make up their own story. But really, how would they know with such a lack of information about the man? You can probably find 3, maybe 4 images of him as an adult, and most of those came after he was arrested, or after he turned himself in, I should say. In a world where information is currency, you don't have to be the loudest one, the most seen. You don't have to be the varsity athlete in the family to score a touchdown. You don't have to be the one that everybody calls the leader to put together the heist of the century, which I think Joaquin pulled off. But I'm not here to praise his achievements. I'm here to reiterate the whys, the hows, and show the true nature of these criminals and the difference between how they move and how they expect you to move. Joaquin wasn't raised on the same no snitching code that you were raised on in the streets and in TV and in media. He grew up in a system where quiet cooperation was not betrayal, it was insurance. Silence was leverage and cooperation was a tool. How he grew up, this is just the way the game was played. So it was normalized and nothing for him when his time came. And he, once again, is another one that proved that your favorite gangster just might be a snitch. Most people know Ovidio, based off his arrest in 2019, which caused the Culiacanazo, a broad daylight melee and war between soldiers and hundreds of cartel operatives in the streets of Culiacan. A bloody fight that ended once Ovidio was released, by order of the president. Then you have Ivan, who is now considered the leader of the Chapitos, and his brother Jesus Alfredo, 2 people that we've seen over the years be arrested or kidnapped or sanctioned by the United States, but you rarely, if ever, hear of Joaquin. That is until July 25th, 2024, when Joaquin, on a private Beechcraft airplane, crossed international borders between Mexico and the United States and landed at the Doña Ana Jetport in Santa Teresa, New Mexico. That plane landed without incident, without being blown out the sky by the United States government, with 3 passengers aboard. The pilot, who we don't know to this day, Joaquín Guzmán López Jr., and the infamous, the notorious, the untouchable Ismael and Mayo Zambada. Here you see the airport and the plane rolling in. You'll see agents run up to the plane and they will apprehend 2 men. First man was Joaquín Guzmán, second man, El Mayo Zambada. El Mayo is one half of the partnership between himself and El Chapo as leaders of the Sinaloa cartel. For over 50 years, El Mayo was almost a myth, a 50-year criminal that had not seen the inside of a jail cell, who had never been prosecuted, who had never gone to prison, who had never been caught by his enemies. A man whose mythology grew to the point of insanity amongst regular people, and what they thought really happened that day that he showed up on that airplane with Joaquin. We heard people say all kind of ridiculous things. They said it's impossible. It's somebody else. It's not him. They said he did it on purpose. He jumped on an airplane and flew to the US. He did it to see his family in his old age, who had already done prison time and were now living in witness protection freely. They made every excuse in the book for him. They had every ridiculous theory about why these 2 wanted men by the United States government crossed that border and landed that plane in the United States. Let's not forget, this was a close family connection here. El Mayo has known the Chapitos their entire lives. He's been partnered with El Chapo for many years. They've had their rifts, they've had their tensions in the past, but from what we saw on the outside looking in, it was a family affair. People even say that Joaquin is the godson of El Mayo. Instantly on this channel, we called it what we believed it was, a kidnapping. As far as I was concerned, that man was not going to leave his ranch, get off that mountain, and come down here to see anybody. He wasn't turning himself in for a better life. It was an event so jarring that even the Mexican prosecutor's office was giving us lies and made up stories to try to explain it to the people and do as much damage control as they could. We instantly didn't buy their lies. And a day later, from an American federal prison, El Mayo penned a letter through his lawyer, Frank Perez, telling the world what really happened. In his letter, he said that he was asked by Joaquin to accompany him to a meeting to quell a disagreement between the governor of Sinaloa, Rubén Rocha Moya, and another Mexican politician, Hector Melesio Quinn Ojeda. This ask from Joaquin to El Mayo to come help quell this political situation is even more proof and evidence that dealings with authorities and political powers was the norm for these people. Having these politicians and police officers in your pockets like so many nickels and dimes. So normalized that El Mayo agreed. As he arrived with his bodyguards, he was asked by Joaquin to enter another room. And when they entered the room, he was knocked over and had a hood put over his head. Hector Melesio Quinn Ojeda was killed, and El Mayo was taken out through the wall, through a window pane that was no longer there because Joaquin had it removed before they got there. He was thrown into the back of a pickup truck and he was driven to the airport. In the days leading up to this letter, one of the lies that the prosecutor's office told us was that Hector Melesio Quinn Ojeda had been murdered in a gas station in an attempted robbery. We didn't buy it from the jump, and El Mayo made sure in his letter to state clearly that Hector Melesio Quinn was not killed in a gas station, but right there in the room where he was kidnapped. On the day they arrived on that airplane, we heard of the arrest of Joaquín Guzmán López Jr. and Ismael El Mayo Zambada. We didn't even hear anything about the pilot. We wondered if the pilot just hopped out the window, went and jumped the fence and went back to Mexico. Was the pilot a member of the Chapitos? Was the pilot a member of the Mexican army? Was he a member of the United States government? And one of our many alphabet agencies? We still don't know. In another letter, El Mayo demanded that the Mexican government repatriate him because he was taken against his will and brought to the United States. Meanwhile, Joaquin, the one that there aren't many stories of, the one that doesn't carry the glorious name that's glorified in corridos and on Instagram and TikTok pages, pulled off a heist that the Mexican government either couldn't or chose not to pull off, and the United States government couldn't pull off. The young one that everybody said wasn't built for this life and was the least of them, pulled off the heist of the century. Got the untouchable man touched. But with whose help? When it happened, Mexico claimed that the United States didn't tell us nothing. We don't know nothing. I want you to understand this very clearly. There were no resources from the United States involved in this operation. It wasn't a United States plane. It wasn't a United States pilot. It wasn't our agents or our people in Mexico. This was an operation between the cartels, where one surrendered the other. And the United States said, well, we don't know nothing either. We don't know what to tell you. And then there's the governor of Sinaloa that was supposed to be there meeting with Melesio Quinn and then Mayo Zambada. And he says he was in the United States, though there's no record of it that I've seen. He says he wasn't at that meeting and that he challenges you to find anything that connects him or links him to that meeting. If they said I was going to be there, then they lied. If they believed it, then they fell for the trap. Because I had no reason, and I have no reason. This is my statement. There is absolutely nothing that can link me to that matter. Nothing. Did he help Joaquin? If you ask me, simply getting over that border alone hints to a longer relationship than just, here I am with the biggest bargaining chip I could ever bring. That's snitching at its finest, is it not? These are the bosses of the bosses and the sons of the bosses of the bosses. And they're turning each other in for good time to shave years off of their sentences. And you want to argue with me about loyalty in this game? You don't cross an American border with a ghost of a pilot, the most valuable bargaining chip you could have ever brought here from Mexico in the back seat, and land in an airport unless there was prior knowledge on both sides of that border about what was happening, whether partially or in its entirety. You're not going to convince me that cooperation starts the day that you cross the border with the most wanted man. Cooperation had to have started way earlier than that, which tells me that it could have started even earlier than that. That's a process that could take months, could take years. It wasn't 24 hours. This wasn't a spur of the moment situation. This wasn't an emotional move and they just pulled the trigger. This was meticulously planned. With the assist of, who knows? What we do know is what Joaquin told us in December 2025 in a courtroom, where he denied any help from the United States government and said this was completely his plan alone, and he executed it without direct help from the United States government. That he basically did the work of law enforcement himself by rounding up the biggest cartel boss of the last 50 years and flying him into the United States across the border from Mexico. All by his lonesome? I think not.
Drug lord Joaquín Guzmán López admitting today to drug trafficking conspiracy and engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise, namely running the notorious and ruthless Sinaloa cartel, stipulating to an extraordinary kidnapping plot and promising to cooperate with the government for a lighter sentence.
If that's true, what's stopping other cartel operatives from just flying a plane over, turning themselves in with a bargaining chip of their choice and making a deal? And some will say, okay, Shy, he called them, he let them know he's on his way. Okay, off good faith, no trust. I'll also say that at this court hearing, the tone was very laxed, almost comedic. When the judge asked what he did for a living, he said drug trafficker, and the judge laughed, as did everybody else in the courtroom. Must be a charming guy.
When asked by the judge what his job was for the past 5 years, he replied, drug trafficker, to chuckles from the courtroom and the judge herself, surprised at his candor.
Who can really attest to how long he'd been talking to United States law enforcement? What about the bodies he left at the scene, the bodyguards that were never found? They're talking about him maybe serving 10 years. It was also said by his lawyer that he'll be getting no real credit for turning over El Mayo.
The government on the record saying that abduction was not at their request, and Guzmán López agreed he would get no credit for cooperation for it. His attorney, Jeffrey Lichtman, believes the sentence will be lower than life. The government agreed in court and said Guzmán López could spend as little as 10 years in federal prison, but sentencing is up to the judge.
She takes all the recommendations, she listens, and she makes up her own decision, because that's why she's the judge, why none of us are the judges, because she's not partisan.
Someone delivers the biggest cartel boss of the last 50 years to law enforcement, and he gets no credit, no visible benefit. That's what they'll tell you. That's what they'd like you to think. 17 family members of Joaquin and Ovidio, including their mother, were brought into the United States by the United States government. 17. During a time where the chaos around immigration is at an all-time high in this country, they made their deal and brought 17 family members in. Ovidio was here in the United States, extradited from Mexico, and baby brother came through with the bargaining chip they both needed so that they can have their family on this side. But they'll make you believe that he got no credit for bringing that bargaining chip over. That doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't happen overnight.
17 members of El Chapo's family have defected here to the U.S.
Now, several law enforcement sources have told our investigative reporter, Chuck Gowdy, that this unusual arrangement is all part of a plea deal in Chicago involving one of the drug lord's sons. Chuck Gowdy joining us now with late details on this story. Chuck?
Stephen, Allison, with the U.S. sending tens of thousands of Mexican citizens out of the country, tonight we have a story of why the Justice Department is paving the way for 17 relatives of drug kingpin El Chapo Guzman to come into the country from Mexico. Chapo's kin tonight essentially defecting for their own safety as part of a guilty plea deal in Chicago by one of the drug lord's sons. The 17 relatives of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman coming across the border with jam-packed roller bags, some filled with thousands in U.S. currency, according to U.S. authorities. Family members converging last Friday here at the border crossing from Tijuana to San Ysidro in Southern California. This woman among the group, Guadalupe Lopez Perez, one of Chapo's ex-wives, and the mother of Chapo's sons, Ovidio Guzman and Joaquin Guzmán López. Both of Chapo's sons being held here in Chicago on major drug trafficking charges. As NBC5 Investigates reported last week, Ovidio Guzman has cut a deal with prosecutors at the Dirksen Federal Building and is scheduled to plead guilty in July. Several current and former federal sources who asked not to be named tonight tell NBC Chicago that the immigration of these 17 Chapo relatives, including a sister, were part of the deal that resulted in Ovidio's guilty plea. The government's immigration red carpet for kin of a drug dealer may come at a high price for Ovidio Guzman. His cooperation against other Sinaloa drug cartel officials who are in custody here. The exodus of El Chapo's blood relatives is a clear sign that they feared retaliation in Mexico, and their defection may signal an unexpected end to the family's decades-long reign atop a cartel that has long controlled 80% of Chicago's illicit street drugs.
The family came over having nothing to do with any agreement. It's not in the agreement. None of them were even under suspicion in Mexico.
He's a very clever lawyer, the way he phrased that, the way he worded that. Those family members weren't even under suspicion. We're not saying they were under suspicion. We're saying they were payment. And what does it say for this life that so many glorify, that the prince wants out of the life, wants a clean slate? Maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be, huh? And what does it say for our government that repeats the word cartel over and over again in the media and blames it for all of our problems? Meanwhile, they arrest one, they make a deal with him, and they pardon another. Do you really care about these crimes? Do you really care about these drugs coming over our border? Or is the headline what matters? Or is hiding your true intentions and what you really want to do behind a crusade against the cartels what really matters? This was a carefully crafted operation. There's only so many ways people at this level, especially people raised in the game the way that they were, leave the game. It's usually death, prison, or they fall off the map. That one's rare. I think that usually means something happened to them. It does keep the legend alive and keep the myth growing. But this exit strategy was planned and benefited the family. That's no accident. Do you think these guys were stressed about cooperating? Do you think these guys were feeling bad for themselves about cooperating? This is a system that they inherited, a system that their father used before them. This was always a viable option. So don't forget, the rules are only there for you. That's probably a game you don't want to play. That's the cartel.